everybody. Happy Friday afternoon. Hope you are ready for the weekend. I wanted to come on because there is some news in the Daybell case. There's been a bit of news, I guess you could say, in the past week or so. And the big news, though, just filed this afternoon. We now know when Chad Daybell's trial will be held. You may recall that his attorney, John Pryor, asked that it be held next June, a year from now. And he said that some of his experts would not be available earlier, and it's not going to be held in June. The judge filed a notice of trial setting this afternoon at 2:40 and said Chad Daybell's trial will begin April 1st of 2024. No April Fool's joke there. And it will finish on May 31st, 2024, assuming it goes that long. So here's what all of this means. There will be a bunch of things that have to happen before the trial actually proceeds, like in Lori's case. We still have, 9 months before this is supposed to happen? And here's kind of the deadlines the judge laid out in these 3 pages. I want to go through them with you. We have the pretrial motions, which have to be filed. This is when the different sides, the prosecution and the defense, file different motions of what they want to argue, what they don't want to argue. All discovery, meaning evidence, must be completed or served on or before 5 p.m. on February 1st. So that's the deadline that both sides have to share what they have, all their discovery, with each other and with the court. February 1st, 2 months before the trial. There will be a pre-trial conference on February 22nd at 9:30. That'll be the final pre-trial conference. That's where basically the attorneys get together with the judge. He says, are we ready to go? Are we ready for the trial? Everyone says, yeah, we're ready. The defendant's appearance is required. Chad Daybell will be there. That will be in Fremont County. The judge says if there is a plea agreement between now and between now and April, which could happen, all plea agreements shall be reduced to writing. Written plea agreements shall be dated and signed by the attorneys for both parties and by the defendant. So if Chad decides to take a plea agreement or his attorney decides to take a plea agreement, they've got to write it down. They've all got to sign it, and then they got to take it to the judge. We do know John Pryor has said that he was going to get a transcript of Lori's entire trial and go to Chad in the jail and let Chad read it. I don't think that transcript's been completed yet. There might be a rough version. The recordings are out there, obviously. Chad could listen to all of the recordings if he wanted, but I don't know if that's happened yet. Let's see. The trial ended May 12th, so 3 weeks ago, right now, today, I think, is when the trial ended. So Chad could be reviewing that. So this is an interesting point too, which was also brought up in Lori's trial. Absent a showing of good cause to extend the following time, written notice must be given at least 90 days in advance of the trial date if a party intends to raise any issue of mental condition or call any expert witness concerning such an issue. So they will have to if John Pryor or the prosecutors, more than likely it would be Pryor, intends to create a defense of mental illness or any issue of mental condition in regards, it would have to be done January 1st by New Year's Day. I don't think that's going to be an issue in this case. There has been no talk of Chad's mental illness, if he has any, or his mental condition. It was much more of an issue in Lori's case. A proposed jury questionnaire is due to the court by January 5th. There will be a closed, sealed hearing on the questionnaire in January to go over that. Same thing happened in Lori's case. The defense gets to submit possible questions they want. Prosecutors do what they want to ask the jurors. They compile these questionnaires, and then like in Lori's case, it'll go out to 1,500, 2,000 people. They'll bring the questionnaires back. They'll eliminate a group of them that way. If they say, yeah, I read everything Nate Eaton ever wrote about this trial, they're going to be eliminated. If they don't know anything about this trial, they could get called to the courthouse. Proposed jury instructions must be submitted to the parties and the court by 5 p.m. on March 11th, along with a list of exhibits and witnesses by March 11th. So the timeline is you've got January 1st, if Chad intends to do any sort of mental illness, if it's going to be discussed in the trial, you've got that. After January 1st, come February, you've got the deadline for all discovery. That's on February 1st. February 22nd, there's the final pretrial conference, which is a court hearing where they all get together. And then on March 11th, the final list of witnesses and exhibits and jury instructions, proposed jury instructions, are due. That's go time. A plea agreement, if it's going to happen, will be in writing. So what happens between now and then? Well, they prepare for trial. They prepare for evidence. John Pryor goes through all of the evidence. He gets together with Chad. There might be a few hearings between now and the end of the year. I would imagine there would be. I think that you could see John Pryor filing a few motions between now and then. The big question I've been asked a lot lately is, are we going to get a camera in Chad's trial? And I will say that the camera ban issued by Judge Boyce is still in effect, but we are going to try again and see if he will reconsider and allow us to live stream the trial, even if it's through the court's cameras, which is how Lori's the verdict was carried that so many of you watched. Speaking of Lori, next on the agenda for her is the sentencing, which is next month. Right now, a pre-sentence investigation is underway. They are going through everything in Lori's life, honestly. They're interviewing her. They're talking to people close to her. They are trying to get together everything they can. I want to tell you what's in this pre-sentence investigation. They are sealed. These reports are sealed for life. What will happen is this investigation will be done. It will be given to the judge. It will be given to her attorney and the prosecution, but it's sealed forever. Unless somebody leaks it to us or gives it to us in those parties, we won't get one. We won't get to see what it happens. So the pre-sentence investigation will include a description of the situation surrounding the criminal activity, the defendant's version of the criminal act. If Lori decides to talk with the investigator and say, that's not how it went, this is how I think it went, the arresting officer's reports, the victim's version of what happened in cases where that's possible. Obviously, in this case, we have the victims who are no longer with us. And any prior criminal record, which Lori, doesn't have one, the defendant's social history, including her marriages, her age, her interest in activities, her educational background, her employment background, the residence history of the defendant, the financial status, the health of the defendant, her sense of values and outlook on life in general. That would be interesting to read in this particular case. The results of any substance abuse evaluation, mental health evaluation, that will likely be a big part of Lori. Domestic assault and battery evaluation, a psychosexual evaluation, and then the pre-sentence investigator's analysis of the defendant's condition. The analysis of the defendant's condition contained in the pre-sentence report should include a complete summary of the pre-sentence investigator's view of the psychological factors surrounding the commission of the crime or regarding the defendant individually, which the investigator discovers. Where appropriate, the analysis should include a specific recommendation regarding a psychological examination and a plan of rehabilitation. Now, this applies to every case where a pre-sentence report is ordered. So if I go and steal a $1,500 TV from Walmart and I'm found guilty, this report's going to be done on me, and it's going to be done on Lori Vallow Daybell, the same one. And there are different levels of where a judge, I've heard reference pre-sentence reports and say, the investigator finds that your chance of reoffending is very low and that this was your first time offense and I'm going to go easy on you, in so many words. There's been other cases I've covered where they've said the pre-sentence investigation raised some major concerns. You are at a high risk to reoffend. And because of that, we're going to do this, this, and this. Lori Vallow faces 2 murder charges, was convicted of 2 murder charges, was convicted of 3 conspiracy murder charges, and was convicted of grand theft. I don't see a sentence anything lower than life in prison. She does not qualify for the death penalty, but it would be stunning. Or maybe the judge on each count does 25-year fixed and they're run consecutively, meaning one after the other. So 6, well, the grand theft, she probably wouldn't get 25 years, but five counts, 25 years each, that's 125 years. I don't know how that would work, but just an example for you. Chad, on the other hand, will be different because as it stands today, Chad faces the death penalty. And jury selection in Chad's case will be a lot longer than in Lori's. Jury selection was 4 days. Then they had a jury picked by noon on Friday. The jurors will be asked a lot more questions about what are your views on the death penalty? What are your views on the sanctity of life, on this or that or what other? And the defense will not want someone who says, yeah, I believe everyone should be put to death. They're not going to want that. The prosecution's not going to want someone who says, I am adamantly opposed to the death penalty on all counts. They're going to try to find people who are in the middle. By the way, if you're watching, I'd love to know your view, if you're comfortable sharing your view on the death penalty in the comments. It's an issue that I think a lot of people are passionate about. Some people don't really care. I think a lot of people have evolved over the years too. I believe currently there are 11 people on Idaho's death row. Let me look that up. Because some of them have been there for a long time. My colleague Caitlin did a good report on Idaho's death row a few months ago before this. There's 8 people on death row in Idaho. And one has been, I'm getting a bunch of ads pop up. 8 criminal, one was found guilty of murdering his wife in 2002. So 20 years later, still hasn't been executed. Sorry, the murder took place in 2002. Another guy, 1981 was when he beat a fellow inmate to death with a sock full of batteries. That was his second conviction. Timothy Dunlap in 91 robbed a bank in Soda Springs. He handed the teller a note. She handed him $32,000. He then shot her from less than 2 weeks away. It was the second woman he had murdered that year. 10 days before the bank robbery, he took his girlfriend on a picnic in Ohio, blindfolded her like he had a surprise for her, and then shot her in the neck and head with a crossbow. Goodness. That was in 91. James Hairston, at the age of 19, robbed and killed a couple in Downey, which is in southeast Idaho. He shot the husband in the head as he was sitting at his kitchen table before shooting the wife. He got away with $30 in cash, credit cards, and personal property, which he pawned. He was with someone. Eric Hall killed somebody in Boise in 2000, raped her, strangled her with a sweater. Gerald Pizzuto killed somebody in McCall. Anyway, you can see they're horrific crimes. Jonathan Renfro shot a police officer. And then the one woman on death row in Idaho, Robin Rowe. In 1992, I was 8. She set her family home on fire, leading to a carbon monoxide poisoning death of her husband, her 10-year-old sons, must have been twins, and her 8-year-old daughter while they were sleeping. She killed them to collect life insurance money from outrageous policies she had taken out on her family. Some believe she may have killed 2 of her other children in the late 70s and early 80s. Okay, so I tell you all that because we have 8 people on death row right now. It's not common for someone to get sentenced to death. When it does happen, I will be 70 or 80 before Chad Daybell, statistically speaking, dies on death row if that does happen. There will be decades of appeals. So what could be happening between now and next April when he's supposed to go to trial? I imagine there will be a lot of talk about plea agreements. What Chad's willing to plead to, if anything, especially after Lori was found guilty on all counts, what the prosecution is willing to negotiate with. I imagine I know that the ball is definitely in their court. They just won a huge case. They've done this case. They've done the trial. And there's more. I hear that there is much more they have on Chad that we haven't heard that could be brought up at Chad's case. So in Chad's trial. So the prosecution might say, okay, we'll take death penalty off the table and maybe we'll drop the insurance fraud charges. This is hypothetical. I'm just making this up. I haven't heard this from anybody. We'll drop the insurance charges. He gets life in prison. Or maybe we drop the conspiracy and he just pleads on the murders. So anyway, that's what will be happening between now and next April. I got diverted talking about Lori. Sorry, about Lori on July 31st. So I was talking about the pre-sentence investigation. All that's happening with the investigator. Lori could choose not to cooperate with this pre-sentence investigator. She could say, I'm not talking to you. Get out of here. And the investigator leaves. And that's that. Or she could talk to them. Regardless, the judge will get the report. He'll get it a few weeks before, I would imagine, or at least days before the sentencing date. July 31st, it's going to happen at the Fremont County Courthouse. It will be live streamed. We'll have it for you. Wherever you're watching right now, come back on July 31st and watch because we're going to have it for you streaming live. And it will be a few hours, I believe, because this isn't just something where Lori shows up and the judge says, all right, Lori, life in prison, goodbye. Her attorneys will argue what they think she should get. They could argue for probation. They could argue that she's mentally ill, that she shouldn't go away for life and she should get probation. The prosecution will likely argue for life. They will both have, I imagine, pretty solid arguments. That could be lengthy. Then victims will take the stand. Actually, the victims could take the stand before they argue the sentencing, what they would recommend. I imagine Larry and Kay Woodcock will make a victim impact statement. And they'll go on the stand and they'll be able to talk as long as they want. And they can look Lori in the eyes and they can say whatever they want, pretty much. I have covered when 3 years ago maybe, when Brian Drips, for those who aren't familiar with the Angie Dodge case, this is a young woman who was murdered in her apartment in Idaho Falls back in 1993, I think. Her name was Angie Dodge. Her throat was slashed. She was left to die. She did die. And a man was sentenced for her crime after going through a jury trial. And anyway, it turns out, long story, he did not commit the crime. DNA evidence proved he did not commit the crime. Chris Tapp was released from jail after serving 20 years for a crime he did not commit from prison. Police then tracked down the real killer. His name was Brian Drips. He threw a cigarette out the window. They gathered the cigarette. They tested it. Genealogy DNA, fascinating thing, tracked it back to him. He entered a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty. They didn't go to trial. But I covered the day that he was sentenced. It was during COVID. They had plastic sheets, not sheets, but like plexiglass up. And I remember Carol Dodge, Angie's mother, had a photo of her daughter's body with the slash on the throat. And just right after, it was a horrific photo. She had it printed on a huge banner. I believe it was Carol. If not, it was another family member. And they laid it on the floor in the courtroom, right in front of Brian Drips, and made him look at it. It was too graphic. We couldn't show it. And then Carol read it. It was actually I don't want to call a victim impact statement beautiful, but it was beautiful. It was powerful. She had it all written out. Imagine she probably has waited 20 years to read that to the person that killed her daughter. Little different circumstances because they originally had the wrong guy, but you can imagine Kay and Larry have probably waited 4 years. What would you say to the person who killed your grandson and his sister and is accused of killing your brother, Charles Vallow? What would you say? And Tammy's children, if they want, could make a statement as victims. They weren't at the trial. I don't expect that we'll hear from them, but they could. Tammy's siblings and her parents could have a victim impact statement. They could write a letter that they ask the judge not to be made public, that the judge just reads and considers in his sentencing. They could write a letter that is read. They could have somebody read it. I've covered those. I've covered cases where victims have called in on the phone and read their victim impact statement. So that day with Lori, July 31st, it'll be, I imagine, a very emotional day. Lori will likely be offered the chance to say something by the judge. It'll be fascinating to see if she says anything. I've covered other hearings where the defendant is sobbing, apologizing, and is all over the place as far as just moved by it. I've covered others where the defendant doesn't say a word, keeps a straight face, and that's that. How Lori acts, we'll see. So that's what will happen on the 31st. We're going to stream that live. If you want to go to the courthouse, it's first come, first serve. I'm going to be up there really early because I want a seat. Again, this one's in St. Anthony. So if you can't make it, don't worry. I promise we'll stream it for you. And then we'll have live coverage after the fact. And then after that, Lori will be transferred over immediately to the Idaho Department of Correction. She won't be in jail anymore, assuming she goes to prison. She will go to Pocatello, where the Women's Correctional Center is. That's the prison. That's where you do hard time, quote unquote. How long will she be there before Arizona takes her? We'll see. They could say, all right, ready to extradite. That could take, if Lori doesn't fight that, she could be there within, a week or two. If she fights extradition, like she says, I don't think they have enough grounds to move me there, that could take months. And then she could wait there, and then she could go on and face those charges there. She's charged in Arizona for conspiracy to commit murder on Charles Vallow, her fourth husband, and conspiracy to commit murder on Brandon Boudreaux, her former nephew-in-law. So that's where it stands now. Many of you are asking, have Lori and Chad communicated? What was Chad's reaction during the verdict? Did Chad see it live? I'm told that Chad is preparing his own defense, and that he is busy daily getting ready to go to trial. He's aware of what happened with Lori, how she was found guilty, and I know there's been rumors out there that he broke down bawling and crying, and I can't really confirm that or deny it, but I don't. Chad has not shown much emotion through pretty much all of this. You've seen Chad. How he was in Hawaii when I saw him 3.5 years ago is, I think, kind of how he's been all along. What was Chad's reaction to the braids? Well, I don't know. I assume you're referring to Lori's mugshot picture when she was booked into the Madison County Jail. So I know a lot of you are just joining, wondering what in the world we're talking about. A trial date has been set for Chad Daybell. He will go to trial in Ada County in Boise on April the 1st of 2024. Pretty much, this is the exact same time frame as Lori's. It's going to be deja vu all over again. I imagine when the trial happens, if he doesn't cop a plea agreement between now and then, it'll probably be the same ticketing type system which we dealt with Lori, where you go on every morning and you get a ticket. I'll be there every day. I should say almost every day, depending on the timing. I have a friend, one of my best friends is getting married in Jamaica and it's a destination wedding and my wife and I are going. And so if that happens, one of my colleagues will be there to cover it for just that time frame, probably those 3 days. But there's a chance the trial could be over when that's supposed to happen. But April seems to be the time. I know. I mean, you think about all of the witnesses. There were 60 witnesses for Lori's trial. The prosecution's going to have at least that many for Chad's. And when I talk about the death penalty, there will then be a death penalty phase if Chad is found guilty. The jury will find him guilty, not guilty. And then after that, the defense will argue how he shouldn't die, and they can call witnesses to say, this is why he shouldn't be put to death. The prosecution will argue, this is why he should die. I got to get a drink, 1 minute. So, you like our East Idaho News mugs? Brand new. Just came in. There we go. I'm getting a reflection off my light. There we go. Yeah, red on the inside. So, anyway, there's our mugs. The prosecution will argue that Chad should die. The defense will argue that he shouldn't. And that could take another week of testimony. And then the jury will come back and say, yes, he should, or no, he shouldn't. So that'll take more time. So the judge really you have to coordinate getting all of your witnesses there. You have to coordinate courtroom availability. Ada County is the busiest courthouse in the state. That with Lori Vallow, it created increased pressure with people coming from all over the place, many of you. And they have to get security. I mean, there's so much to work through. And you think about the Brian Kohberger case. Now, that one's scheduled for trial this fall. And if the judge decides to move that to Ada County, I guess that could happen this fall, and then Daybell could happen after that. I honestly don't know if the Kohberger case will happen this fall. That's a lot to get done between now and then. And you look at the Daybell case, how long it took for each one. I noticed, why was the death penalty taken off for Chad but not Lori? Well, it was on for both of them. Lori refused to waive her right to a speedy trial. There was a lot of evidence that came in last minute, a lot of evidence. And the mitigation specialist, the person that's assigned to death penalty cases to advocate on Lori's behalf, told Judge Boyce, I do not have enough time to go through all of this new evidence and do my job on her behalf. I will not be ready for trial. So the trial basically, I'm summarizing here, has to be pushed back so I can be ready, or I can't do this. And so the judge's hands were tied. He could either have pushed Lori's trial back, but that violates her right to a speedy trial, which is supposed to happen within 6 months of arraignment. And that didn't happen with her. It was pushed back. So it was already past the deadline. The further you push it back, the more chances are that it gets thrown out on appeal. So the judge said, I can either drop the death penalty and we can proceed with the trial, or if she's not going to waive her right, I would push the trial back. So that was his alternate. And the defense is going to see that as a win. I mean, the fact that they got death penalty off the table. And Lori will probably see that as a win too. I mean, she stuck to her guns. She did not waive her right to a speedy trial. Because of that, she's not facing the death penalty. Chad waived his right to a speedy trial. That's why his trial has been pushed off. That's why the judge said, okay, all this evidence came in, and John Pryor, his attorney, said, I do not have enough time to go through all of this by the time that Lori's trial started. So that's why the judge severed the cases. They were together all along. He severed the cases. He took death penalty off for Lori. Chad, death penalty remains. I hope that all makes sense. So we're going to get 2 trials out of it. It'll be interesting. It would have been fascinating, don't you think, to see if Lori and Chad had both been in there together. But because they weren't, we'll see what's different with Chad's trial. So many of you are asking about my interview with the juror. In case you missed it, I interviewed Saul Hernandez, juror number 8, who spoke openly and candidly with me and respectfully about the court and the trial. And last Friday, Lori's attorneys filed a motion that the verdict should be overturned and there should be a new trial because of 3 reasons. Basically, one reason was they said that the judge's instruction to the jury was confusing. The second reason was that when the prosecution asked to modify some language in the indictment right before the case was closed, that there was confusion there. And the third reason was because they said of my interview with the juror. And I re-interviewed Saul earlier this week. If you want to go watch it, and he stood by the interview. And the one of the big issues of concern for Lori's attorneys was the fact that he referenced the body camera footage in Arizona that showed Charles saying Lori was crazy and that he was now Ned Schneider. Well, that portion was not used in the trial. And so the defense said he relied on information not used in the trial to come up with the verdict. But that's not the case, because after the trial ended, Saul and his wife watched Dateline 2 days later. And then I did the interview with him 2 days after that, or 3 days after that. Once the trial's over, jurors can watch whatever they want. They can binge, and a lot of them do go and binge every single thing that's written about the trial. They can go watch Netflix. They can go watch Dateline. They can watch this. Maybe they're watching right now. So they can do whatever they want. That's where Saul saw the body camera footage. And the question I asked was, what was your view on law enforcement, how they did? And he responded something to the effect that Arizona dropped the ball on the case. And then I said, we went back and forth. You can go watch it. You can read it. So I defend the interview. He defends the interview. He went on and clarified it later. I do think this is more of a procedural type filing where any defense attorney is going to file that, yeah, the verdict should be overturned on behalf of my client. So that's kind of where I stand on that. And I don't have anything more to say on that. What the prosecution will have a chance to respond to the filing and quote whatever they want. Jim Archibald has asked for a hearing, an oral hearing. So that could happen this month. And if that happens, we will cover it. And of course, I'll be there. And I don't think a camera will be allowed in. I hope a camera's allowed in, but if not, I'll be there to bring you updates. All right. I don't know if we have any other questions. We do. Can the judge sentence Lori to the state mental hospital? No, it can't. That's not an option here. She could get sentenced to prison or probation. I mean, I guess he could send her to a mental facility. I don't know how that would work. Overturn her to the Department of Health and Welfare, which she had served before. But no, I don't think she'll be sentenced to a state mental institution. I heard the LDS Church is making sure there are no cameras. Is that true? I don't know how that would be true, how the LDS Church could come in and say that there can be no cameras. It was Judge Boyce that determines his courtroom. Every judge in Idaho has their own jurisdiction in their own courtroom. Some judges allow a camera into everything. We have some judges that we can go in with a camera, but we can't record any audio. We have to get the official court recording. And personal opinion, that makes no sense to me. I'm all about a camera in every courtroom. I'd love to have that. In some states, like in Florida, they're very open with cameras. In some states, New York, others, no cameras. Virginia, where I used to work, you rarely got a camera in. So, the LDS Church would, if the LDS Church wanted no cameras, they would have to file a motion through the court to say, this is why we don't want cameras, but they're not really a party to it. So we are, as the media, we filed a motion to say cameras should stay in there, and that's what we wanted. So the judge makes the decision on that. Why is the death penalty allowed for Chad, not Lori? I think I already answered that. So that's what we have right now. Some of you are messaging me asking, what are you talking about? We're talking about Chad and Lori Daybell. That's what we have going on today. I do want to tell you that there'll be some other cases not Daybell related that I'm following. I spoke actually with 2 people today regarding 2 different murder cases that are happening that I hope to do courtroom insiders on as we get closer. Maybe as soon as next week, if everything works out for one of these cases. There's a lot of people that are looking for justice, and I thank you all for reaching out to me about all of these different cases. I frankly don't have the time, and I live in Idaho, so most of my stuff's going to be Idaho. There have been some interesting one, like this doctor from Missouri, I believe. I've been getting some information about that. Unfortunately, his body was found just the other day. But anyway, I'm going to keep following it. And there's some other cases that we will be on top of. Where can I get t-shirts? Oh, we do have a few more t-shirts that came in. We sold out like so fast a few weeks ago. I think we have like 50 left maybe. Here's one if you want to see it. This says East Idaho News Chopper Fan. If you've ever seen me in the helicopter, this is what this shirt looks like. And then this one is High in the Sky, like our East Idaho News helicopter. There you go. And this is, I swear to you, the very last one. I love East Idaho News. I heart East Idaho News. So there's our t-shirt. I'm not a salesman, but if you want to buy a shirt, it's eastidahonews.com/shop. That's where you can buy them. All right, everybody. I hope that you're doing well. Thank you all again for watching. I hope you have a good weekend. Real quick recap. Chad Daybell's trial is happening April 1st, 2024. It's scheduled to end May 31st, 2024, which ironically, it better be done by then because that is when CrimeCon starts in 2024. Just to tease for you, I will be at CrimeCon this year talking about a case. And CrimeCon is in Orlando in September of this year, and it's September 22nd through the 24th, I believe. Why don't I have it on my calendar? It's this year, CrimeCon, and if you want to go, I'm going to have a discount code that you can get a discount for your tickets. If you're wondering what in the world CrimeCon is, look it up. I've been the past 2 years. It's fascinating. I'll be there. It's every big case you can imagine on one stage. Last year, Jean-Benet Ramsey's dad was there. All the Dateline crew was there last year. Keith Morrison was there. Nancy Grace is there. Dr. Phil was there a few years ago. OJ, Nicole Brown Simpson's sister was there. They've had all sorts of fascinating people there. And it's going to be in Orlando this year. And it's September 22nd through the 24th. And anyway, next year, Chad Daybell's trial, April 1st through May 31st, starts at 9 a.m. The pretrial conference is February 22nd of 2024. There's a bunch of other deadlines between now and then. All right, 5 o'clock Friday. Perfect timing to end here in Eastern Idaho. Have a great weekend. We'll be back again. Thank you for